The cold metal floor hurt Nora's knees as she knelt in the center of the alien courtroom. Her hands were locked in heavy chains that made clicking sounds every time she moved. The chains were so heavy that her shoulders ached, but she kept her back. Straight and her head up high, above her on tall metal chairs, sat 5 alien judges. Their skin was gray like old concrete, and their eyes were black holes that seemed to look right through her. They called themselves the Vorthan Empire, and they had conquered Earth just 3 months ago. Now they owned every human in the galaxy like cattle. Dr. Kim Nari had been the best doctor at Seoul National Hospital before the invasion. She had saved thousands of lives with her gentle hands and sharp mind, but none of that mattered now. The only thing that mattered was that she had broken their rules. The biggest alien judge leaned forward. His voice sounded like metal scraping against stone when he spoke in broken human language. Human female Kim Nari, you stand accused of healing wounded prisoners without permission. Nari looked up at him without fear. She had treated 15 injured humans in the prison camp last week. The aliens had beaten them badly during work duty. Some had broken bones. Some had deep cuts that were getting infected. She could not just watch them suffer. "I am a doctor," she said quietly. "My job is to heal people." The judge made a sound like angry static. "The crime is clear. You gave medical treatment to prisoners. This is against Vorthan law. Prisoners are property. Property does not receive medical care unless the owner permits it." Property Nari felt anger burn in her chest like fire. Humans were not property. They were people with families and dreams and hopes. The aliens could chain their bodies, but they could never own their souls. The second judge spoke up. His voice was higher, but just as cold. "What do you say in your defense, human?" Nari stood up slowly. The chains were so heavy she could barely move, but she managed. To get to her feet, she looked at each alien judge one by one. "I say that you are wrong," she said clearly. "Every living thing deserves care when they are hurt. Every person deserves to be treated like they matter. I will not apologize for being human." Aliens made angry clicking sounds among themselves. They had expected her to beg for mercy. Most humans did when they faced Vorthan justice, but Nari was not most humans. She had grown up poor in the mountains of Korea where life was hard. Her grandmother had taught her that some things were more important than being safe. The third judge stood up. He was taller than the others and had scars across his face like someone had tried to claw him. "Human Nari, your species continues to disappoint us. You do not understand your place in the new order. You think you still have rights, you think you still matter." He walked down from his high chair and came close to her. His breath smelled like rotten meat and chemicals. "Let me explain something to you, small creature. Humans are weak. Humans are stupid. Humans are useful only for simple work. Your planet fell in 6 days. Your armies could not even slow us down. Your government surrendered like frightened children." Nari stared right back at him. She was scared, but she would not let him see it. "We fell because we were not ready." She said, "We trusted too much. We thought beings from other worlds would be like us, but you are not like us. You have no honor." The alien judge hit her across the face with the back of his hand. The blow was so hard it knocked her to the ground. Blood filled her mouth, but she did not cry out. Instead, she wiped the blood away and stood back up. The first judge spoke again. "The sentence has been decided. You will be taken to Planet Koros 7. This world is used for scientific research. It has an ecosystem designed to kill any life form within days. The longest any creature has survived. There is 9 days and 22 hours. He pulled out a small computer device and read from it in his cold voice. "Our calculations show you have a 1% chance of surviving the first week, a 0.03% chance of surviving the first month. It is impossible to survive longer than that." The environment will kill you in ways that are both efficient and educational for our research teams. The other judges made sounds that might have been laughter. Nari felt her heart beating fast. Planet Koros 7 sounded like a nightmare world, but at least it would be better than watching more humans suffer in the prison camps. At least she would die free. Send me to your death world, she said. Her voice was steady and strong. I am not afraid. The judge seemed surprised by her calm response. Most condemned prisoners screamed or begged or promised to be good slaves. But this small human female just stood there like she had already won some kind of victory in the prisoner holding area. Other humans pressed against the energy bars to watch Nari being led away. Lee Taman was a former soldier who had been captured during the last battle for Seoul. He grabbed the arm of his friend Park Ji-ho. Look at her, Taman whispered. She is not broken. They could not break her. Ji-ho nodded sadly. She was the best doctor on Earth. If anyone could survive, it would be her. But nobody survives the death worlds. They watched as the guards pushed Nari into a small transport ship. The other prisoners stood in silence. Some of them had been treated by her gentle hands in the past week. She had cleaned their wounds and set their broken bones and whispered words of hope when they thought all hope was gone. Now she was gone too. Another light taken away from their dark world. The transport ship was barely big enough for one person. Nari sat on a hard metal bench as the ship lifted off from the prison station. Through a tiny window, she could see the stars getting brighter as they left the atmosphere. The pilot was an alien she had never seen before. His species looked like insects with too many arms. He did not speak to her during the 3-day journey, but sometimes she caught him looking at her with what might have been curiosity. On the 3rd day, they reached Koros 7. Nari pressed her face to the window and saw a world that looked like a green and purple nightmare. The entire planet was covered in forest, but not the kind of forest she remembered from Earth. These trees were massive and dark and seemed to move even when there was no wind. Purple mist floated between the tree trunks like ghostly fingers. The whole world looked alive in a way that made her skin crawl. Strange lights flashed in the depths of the forest. Some were red like fire, others were blue like lightning. Nothing looked safe. Nothing looked familiar. The ship landed in a small clearing. The pilot opened the door and gestured for her to get out. When she stepped onto solid ground, the air smelled like metal and decay, and something else she could not identify. The smell made her stomach turn. Your chains will dissolve in 1 hour, the pilot said in broken human words. After that, you are free to survive or die as you choose. The monitoring station will record your vital signs for research purposes. He handed her a small device that looked like a bracelet. This will let us track your heart rate and brain activity. When it stops working, we will know you are dead. Most subjects die within 3 days. Nari took the bracelet and put it on her wrist. It felt cold against her skin, like wearing a piece of ice. The pilot got back in his ship and sealed the door as the transport lifted off. Nari stood alone in the clearing. The sound of the engine faded away until all she could hear was the forest. Around her, strange birds made sounds like screaming metal. Tree branches creaked and groaned, even though there was no wind. Something large moved in the shadows between the trunks. She looked down at her hands. The chains were already starting to dissolve like they were made of sugar in water. Soon she would be completely free for the first time in months. Free to live or free to die. Nari took a deep breath of the strange air. It tasted like poison, but it was still air. She was still alive. She had medical knowledge and mountain survival skills and something the aliens would never understand. She had the will to live. They gave me a 1% chance, she said to the empty forest. Well, 1% is still a chance. Thunder rumbled overhead and purple lightning flashed between the clouds. In the distance, something roared with a sound that shook the ground under her feet. Dr. Kim Nari picked up a sharp stick from the ground and walked toward the trees. She had work to do. The first night almost killed her. Nari found a small cave between two massive tree roots, but sleep was impossible. Every sound made her jump awake. Strange creatures howled in the darkness. Things with too many legs skittered across the ground near her hiding spot. She could hear heavy footsteps circling her cave, but whatever was out there never came close enough for her to see it. When purple dawn light filtered through the forest canopy, she crawled out of the cave. Her whole body ached from sleeping on hard stone. Her throat was dry as sand and her stomach cramped with hunger, but she was alive, and that was more than the aliens expected. The forest looked different in daylight, but not safer. The trees were so tall, she could not see their tops even when she craned her neck back as far as it would go. Their bark was dark purple and covered in sharp spikes that looked like they could cut through metal. The leaves were silver and made tinkling sounds when they moved like tiny bells purple. Mist floated everywhere between the tree trunks. It moved like it was alive, flowing around obstacles and gathering in thick pools in low areas. Nari noticed that small animals that ran through the mist started coughing and stumbling. Something about that mist was very wrong. She picked up a rock and threw it into a thick patch of mist. The rock dissolved before it hit the ground. Acid mist, she whispered to herself. That explains why nothing lives at ground level. Looking up, she saw that the tree branches were full of life. Strange bird-like creatures with too many wings flew from branch to branch. Furry animals that looked like cats but had 6 legs climbed up and down the bark. There were even plants growing on the branches, flowers that glowed with soft light. The safe zone was up in the trees, but getting there would not be easy. The bark spikes looked razor-sharp, and the lowest branches were at least 20 feet above her head. She would have to climb straight up a wall of knives. Nari studied the tree closest to her cave. The spikes were not random. They formed patterns like they were placed there on purpose. Some areas had fewer spikes than others. If she was very careful and very lucky, she might be able to find a path up. She tore strips of cloth from her prison uniform and wrapped them around her hands and feet. The cloth would not stop the spikes from cutting her, but it might keep her from bleeding to death before she reached the branches. The first spike went through her palm like it was made of butter. Blood ran down her arm, but she kept climbing. The second spike sliced her knee open, the third one cut across her shoulder, but she did not stop climbing. Halfway up the tree, she had to rest. Her hands were slippery with blood, and her vision was getting blurry from blood loss. She pressed her bleeding palm against the bark and closed her eyes, trying to gather strength for the rest of the climb. Something strange happened. The bark under her hand grew warm. Spikes near her fingers started to move, pulling back into the bark like they were retracting. The tree was helping her. Nari opened her eyes and stared at the smooth patch of bark where the spikes had been. She pressed her other hand against the tree and watched more spikes pull back. "You understand pain," she whispered. "You know what it feels like to be hurt." She kept climbing, but now the tree helped her. The spikes moved away from her hands and feet. Clear paths opened up in the bark, like the tree was showing her the safest route. When she reached the first branch, she collapsed on the thick wood and looked back down. The ground was lost in purple mist. She could not even see her cave anymore. She was in a completely different world up. Here the air was clean and sweet. Birds sang in languages she had never heard. Flowers bloomed in colors that had no names, but she was still bleeding and still hungry and still very much alone. Over the next 2 days, Nari learned the rules of her new world. The mist was thickest in the early morning and late evening. During the middle of the day, it thinned out enough that she could see the ground. The creatures that lived in the trees were mostly harmless if you did not threaten them. The ones that lived on the ground were mostly deadly. She found water by following the sound of dripping. The trees collected dew in their leaves and channeled it down through hollow branches into natural basins. She learned to tell which water was safe. By watching what the tree animals drank, food was harder. The fruits that grew on the branches were either bitter or sweet or tasteless. The bitter ones made her sick. The sweet ones gave her energy. The tasteless ones did nothing at all. She started to understand that the trees were trying to tell her something through taste. On her fourth day, she made her first real discovery. She was sitting on a branch eating a handful of sweet purple berries when she noticed that the cut on her palm was healing faster than it should. A deep gash that should have taken weeks to close was already forming a scab. She looked at the berries in her hand, then at the tree that grew them. This was not just food. This was medicine. Nari spent the rest of the day testing different fruits and leaves and flowers on small cuts she made on her arm. Some did nothing. Some made the cuts worse. But 3 different plants made her heal faster. 1 purple fruit, 1 silver flower, and 1 type of bark that tasted like cinnamon. She started keeping notes on pieces of bark, using her own blood as ink. She wrote down everything she learned, which plants healed wounds, which ones gave energy, which ones made her sick. She drew maps of the tree branches and marked the safest paths between different areas. By the end of her first week, she had filled 20 pieces of bark with notes. She had learned to move through the trees like the animals did, jumping from branch to branch and swinging on vines. She had found a hollow in a massive tree trunk that was big enough to sleep in and safe from the worst predators. Most importantly, she had learned that the forest was not trying to kill her. It was trying to teach her. The monitoring station above the planet recorded her vital signs with growing confusion. According to their computers, she should have died on day 3. Her heart rate was strong, her brain activity was normal, her body temperature was stable. The research team leader, Dr. Vex, sent a message to Commander. Thex on the prison station subject is still alive after 7 days. This is unprecedented. We are detecting unusual plant chemical signatures in her bloodstream. She appears to be adapting to the local flora commander. Thex read the message with anger. The human was supposed to be dead by now. Her survival was making him look foolish in front of his superior officers. Send a probe down, he ordered. I want to see what this creature is doing. The probe was a small flying robot with cameras and sensors. It could move silently through the forest and record everything without being detected. The next morning, it found Nari sitting on a high branch weaving something from plant fibers. She had made a basket and was filling it with different types of healing plants. She moved carefully and quietly like she belonged in this place. Her wounds were almost completely healed. Her prison uniform had been repaired with tree fibers. Her hair was woven with small flowers that seemed to glow. She looked healthy. She looked strong. She looked like someone who planned to stay alive for a long time. As the probe watched, she pressed her hand against the tree bark and whispered something. The bark glowed softly under her palm, like the tree was responding to her touch. The probe recorded everything and sent the data back to the monitoring station. The research team watched the footage in silence. What they were seeing should have been impossible. No creature could form a symbiotic relationship with Koros 7 plant life that quickly, but the human female was not just surviving. She was thriving. And somehow, the forest was helping her do it. Vex made another note in his research log. Subject appears to have established communication with local flora. This suggests previously unknown intelligence in the plant life. Further observation required. Above the forest canopy, alien ships hummed through purple skies, collecting data and asking questions they did not know how to answer. Below, in the trees, Nari finished weaving her basket and climbed higher into the canopy. She had work to do and a forest to learn from. The aliens had given her a 1% chance, but she was starting to think they had calculated wrong. 3 weeks had passed since Nari first climbed into the trees. She no longer looked like a prisoner. Her skin was bronze from filtered sunlight. Her hair hung in braids woven with healing flowers. Her clothes were patched with soft tree fibers that kept her warm at night. She had built a home in the branches 20 feet above the deadly mist. Her shelter was woven from living vines that grew stronger every day. She had a bed of soft moss, a water collection system made from curved leaves, and a garden of healing plants that grew in hollow branches. But she was still alone. That changed on a Tuesday morning when she heard crying. The sound came from somewhere below her in the middle layers of the forest, where the mist was thin but the predators, where many Nari climbed down carefully following the sound through branches thick with silver leaves. She found the source trapped in a metal cage. The creature was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was the size of a large dog, but its body was covered in silver fur that seemed to shine with its own light. It had 4 legs like a wolf, but its head was more like a bird with a curved beak and large, intelligent eyes. Its wings were folded against its sides, but one wing hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. The cage was made of Vorthon metal with energy bars that sparked blue whenever the creature touched them. It was a trap left by the research teams to catch specimens for their experiments. The creature looked at Nari with eyes full of pain and intelligence. It did not try to attack when she approached. Instead, it made a soft sound, like a question. "Easy, friend," Nari whispered, using the same gentle voice she had used with scared patients back on Earth. "Let me help you." She studied the cage carefully. The lock was electronic, but the power source was a simple battery pack. She could not break the code, but she could drain the power. The healing plants she had been eating had changed her body chemistry in ways she was still discovering. One change was that her skin could conduct electricity. Nari pressed her palms against the battery pack and concentrated. The energy flowed into her body like lightning. It hurt, but she had learned to accept pain as part of survival. The battery died, with a small pop, and the cage door swung open. The creature stumbled out and collapsed on the branch. Its broken wing dragged behind it. Blood seeped through silver fur. Nari could see that it was close to death. She had no medical tools except what the forest provided. But she had knowledge and gentle hands and 3 weeks of experience with healing plants. First, she cleaned the wounds with sap from a silver tree that worked like antiseptic. Then she made a paste from purple berries and cinnamon, bark, that would fight infection. The hardest part was setting the broken wing. She had to hold the creature still while she aligned the bones and wrapped them with strips of soft inner bark. The creature never tried to bite her, even when the pain must have been terrible. It seemed to understand that she was trying to help. It made soft sounds that might have been gratitude. Nari worked for hours as the alien suns moved across the purple sky. By evening, the creature was stable. She built a soft nest beside her shelter and carried the patient there carefully. "You need a name," she said as she settled the creature into the moss. "I will call you Hanel. It means sky in my language." Hanel opened one large eye and made a sound that might have been agreement. Then it closed its eyes and slept. Nari watched over her patient through the night. She had not realized how lonely she had become until she had someone to care for. The forest was full of life, but most of it was alien and strange. Hanul was different. Hanul felt like a friend over the next week. Hanul recovered quickly. The healing plants that helped Nari also helped the silver-furred creature. Its wing mended straight and strong. Its wounds closed without infection. Soon it was able to fly short distances between branches, but Hanul did not leave. Instead, it stayed close to Nari, like it had decided she was family. The creature was incredibly intelligent. It learned to understand human words within days. It could sense danger. From miles away, its sharp eyes could spot predators hiding in the mist. It could fly above the canopy to scout for threats or food sources. Most importantly, Hanul could communicate with other forest creatures. Nari discovered this when a pack of Six-legged wolves surrounded their tree one night. The predators were climbing up toward their shelter with hungry eyes and sharp teeth. Nari grabbed a pointed stick and prepared to fight, but Hanul stepped forward and made a series of complex sounds, clicks and whistles and low rumbles. The wolves stopped climbing. They tilted their heads like they were listening. Then they made sounds back. The conversation lasted for several minutes. Finally, the wolves turned around and climbed back down into the mist. "What did you tell them?" Nari asked. Hanul looked at her with intelligent eyes and made a soft sound that somehow meant friend safe no hunt. Here over the following days, Nari learned that Hanul could talk to almost every creature in the forest. The silver-furred animal was like a translator between species. It could explain to the tree dwellers that Nari was not a threat. It could warn the ground animals to avoid her territory. It could even communicate with the plants in ways that Nari was just beginning to understand. Through Hanul, Nari learned that the forest was much more complex than she had realized. Every tree was connected to every other tree through a network of roots that ran underground like cables. The trees shared information across vast distances. They could coordinate responses to threats. They could direct nutrients to plants that needed help. The animals were part of this network too. They carried messages between distant groves. They helped plants reproduce by moving seeds and pollen. They protected young trees from diseases and parasites. The whole forest was like one giant organism with millions of parts all working together. And the Vorthan research teams were like an infection. Hanul showed Nari the damage the aliens had done, whole groves poisoned by chemical experiments, streams contaminated with metal waste, creatures killed or captured for study. The forest was slowly dying from alien interference, but now something new had entered the system. A healer who could help repair the damage, a friend who could bridge the gap between species. Through Hanul, the forest began to trust Nari. Plants grew faster when she tended them. Animals brought her gifts of food and useful materials. The trees themselves began to change their growth patterns to better support her needs. Her shelter expanded as living branches wove themselves into walls and floors. New rooms grew naturally from the tree trunk. Windows opened where she needed light water. Channels formed to bring fresh water directly to her home. She was no longer just surviving in the forest. She was becoming part of it. The monitoring station recorded strange energy readings from her location. The electromagnetic patterns suggested some kind of organized activity. But the research team could not understand what they were seeing. Dr. Vex sent another probe to investigate. This time, the flying robot found something that should not have existed. Nari was sitting in a circle with 12 different creatures, birds with metal feathers, cats with 6 legs, serpents covered in rainbow scales, a bear-like animal with crystalline claws. Even some of the plants seemed to be participating vines that swayed without wind flowers that pulsed with light. She was teaching them, using simple words and hand gestures. She was showing them how to identify different healing plants, how to treat wounds and infections, how to help each other survive. The creatures were learning. They repeated. Her gestures, they practiced on each other. They seemed to understand that knowledge could be shared. Dr. Vex watched the footage with growing alarm. This was not just survival. This was civilization, and at the center of it was a human who should have been dead weeks ago. He sent an urgent message to Commander Thex. The subject is not just adapting, she is organizing the local life forms. This could present a security risk to future research operations. Commander Thex read the message with cold anger. The human was supposed to die. She was supposed to prove that her species was weak and worthless. Instead, she was making him look incompetent. Send a research team to collect her, he ordered. I want that creature brought back for detailed study. But when the research team landed on Keros 7 the next day, they found something waiting for them. Something that should not have been possible. The forest had been warned. 2 months after her arrival, Nari had become something the Vorthan scientists never expected. She was no longer just a survivor or even a resident. She was a leader. Her treehouse had grown into a village in the sky, connected by bridges, woven from living vines. Her home now had 12 different rooms. Each room served a purpose. A medical clinic where she treated injured animals, a workshop where she crafted tools from forest materials, a library where she kept her growing collection of bark, notes, a nursery where orphaned creatures could grow strong. But the most important room was the communication center. Nari had discovered something amazing about the trees. They were not just connected by their roots, they were connected by something much more complex. The root network carried more than water and nutrients. It carried information. Every tree on the planet was part of one massive communication system, like a biological internet made of wood and sap and electrical impulses that traveled faster than nerve signals. The trees could share memories, they could coordinate responses across continents, they could even predict weather patterns and seismic events by feeling vibrations through their root connections. And Nari had learned to plug into this network. It started by accident. She had been treating a sick tree with healing compounds when she pressed her palm against a special patch of bark that felt different from the rest. Suddenly, her mind filled with images and sensations that were not her own. She saw the forest from above like she was flying. She felt the flow of nutrients through miles of roots. She sensed the electrical patterns of 1,000 different animal minds, all connected to the same vast network. The first time it happened, she pulled her hand away in shock, but curiosity won over fear. She pressed her palm back to the bark and let her consciousness flow into the tree. Network learning to navigate the biological internet took weeks of practice. At first, the flood of information was overwhelming. Every tree on the planet seemed to be talking at once, sharing data about soil conditions and weather patterns and animal movements, but gradually she learned to filter the signals to focus on specific areas or types of information. Through the network, she could send messages to creatures hundreds of miles away. She could coordinate responses to threats across multiple forests. She could even influence the growth patterns of trees to create new bridges and shelters. Hanail was fascinated by her new ability. The silver-furred creature would sit beside her for hours while she communed with the tree network. Its intelligent eyes tracked her facial expressions as information flowed through her mind. "What do you see?" Friend Hanail would ask in its complex language of clicks and whistles. Everything Nari would reply, "I see the whole world." The network revealed secrets that amazed her. The forest was ancient, far older than human civilization. The trees had been sharing information for millions of years. They had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts and the rise and fall of countless species. They had learned patience and cooperation and the value of thinking in centuries rather than years. They had also learned to recognize threats. The Vorthan research teams were not the first aliens to experiment on this world. Over the millennia, other species had come and gone, leaving scars that the forest still remembered. But none of the previous invaders had stayed long enough to do permanent damage. They had underestimated the planet just like the Vorthan were doing now. They had seen a primitive ecosystem when they should have seen a unified intelligence through the network. Nari began organizing that intelligence. She started with the medical knowledge. The forest had its own ways of healing, but they were scattered and incomplete. Some trees knew how to fight infections, others could accelerate healing, still others could produce natural painkillers, but none of them knew how to combine these abilities effectively. Nari became the coordinator. She taught trees how to share healing compounds with animals. She showed flying creatures how to carry medicine between distant groves. She helped ground-dwelling animals learn to identify and gather healing plants. The results were dramatic. Infant mortality among the tree animals dropped to almost zero. Diseases that had plagued certain species for generations were eliminated. Injured creatures recovered faster than ever before. But healing was just the beginning. Nari realized that the forest creatures had always been intelligent, but they had never learned to work together. Different species competed for resources instead of sharing them. Predators and prey maintained constant cycles of violence that wasted energy and lives. Through the tree network, she began teaching cooperation. She started with simple lessons, showing herbivores how to warn each other about predator movements, teaching carnivores how to hunt more efficiently so they needed to kill less frequently, coordinating migration patterns so different species did not compete for the same resources. The forest began to change in fundamental ways. Prey animals no longer lived in constant fear because they had early warning systems. Predators no longer faced starvation because their hunting was more successful. Plants received better care because animals understood their needs. Most remarkably, the different species began to specialize. Birds with keen eyesight became scouts, ranging far ahead to spot threats or opportunities. Animals with sensitive noses became trackers, following scent trails to locate food or danger. Creatures with strong bodies became builders, helping to construct bridges and shelters. Even the plants took on specialized roles. Some trees focused on producing medicine, others concentrated on growing fruit. Still others optimized their wood for construction. Material Nari found herself at the center of this transformation. The creatures came to her not just for healing, but for guidance. They brought her problems and accepted her solutions. They treated her decisions as law. Through Hanol, she learned that the animals had given her a name in their shared language. They called her the Bridge Walker because she could move between species and help them understand each other. The monitoring station above the planet recorded energy readings that made no sense. The electromagnetic patterns suggested coordination on a planetary scale, but the research team could not believe what their instruments were telling them. Dr. Vex studied the data with growing alarm. The energy signatures looked like communication networks, but that was impossible. Plants could not communicate over long distances. Animals could not coordinate complex behaviors across continents, yet the evidence was undeniable. Something was organizing the entire ecosystem of Keros 7. He sent a message to Commander Thex requesting permission to send a larger research team. The subject appears to have caused significant ecological changes that require further investigation. Commander Thex was growing tired of hearing about the human who refused to die. Every report made his original calculations look more foolish. His superiors were starting to ask uncomfortable questions. "Send whatever teams you need," he replied. "But I want results. The human will be captured and studied. The planet will be secured for research. We will not be embarrassed by one primitive creature." Dr. Vex began planning the largest research expedition in Vorthon history. 50 scientists, 20 armed guards, advanced equipment for studying and capturing unknown life forms. They would land in force and take control of the situation once and for all. But as the expedition ships prepared to depart, Dr. Vex received one final probe report that made him pause. The human subject had been observed sitting in what appeared to be a council, meeting with representatives from every major species on the planet: birds, mammals, reptiles. Even some of the mobile plants had gathered in a natural amphitheater. They seemed to be discussing something important. The human was using hand gestures and simple words, while Hanul translated between species. Different creatures took turns making complex vocalizations that might have been reports or suggestions. At the end of the meeting, every creature present made the same gesture, touching their foreheads with whatever appendage they had available. It looked like a salute. Dr. Vex stared at the footage for a long time. Then he added one final note to his report. The subject appears to have established leadership over the local fauna and possibly flora as well. Recommend extreme caution in future contact. But even as he wrote the warning, Dr. Vex did not understand what he was really seeing. Nari was not just leading the forest creatures, she was teaching them to be ready for war. Dr. Vex lowered his weapon and stepped forward. His scientific mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The human female who should have been dead months ago stood before him like a queen receiving visitors in her palace. Around her, the forest, waited in perfect silence. Thousands of eyes watched from every branch and shadow. The very air seemed to hold its breath. Nari descended from the canopy with fluid grace. Vines lowered her to the ground like a living elevator. Her feet touched the earth without a sound, and immediately flowers bloomed where she stepped. Behind her came Hanol, the silver-furred creature that served as her translator and guardian. The rest of the Council of Species remained in the trees, but their presence was felt by every member of the expedition. Dr. Vex tried to maintain scientific objectivity as he approached, but his hands shook slightly. His instruments detected energy patterns that defied explanation. The electromagnetic readings suggested the woman was somehow connected to every living thing in the forest, subject Kimnari. He began in formal Vorthon language. You have exceeded all survival projections. We have come to study the methods you have used to adapt to this environment. Nari smiled, and the expression transformed her face. She looked younger and older at the same time, like someone who had learned secrets that aged the mind but healed the spirit doctor. She replied in perfect Vorthon, "You may call me Nari. My friends do not use titles when they speak with me." Her command of their language surprised him. She spoke with the accent of someone who had learned from native speakers, but he knew that was impossible. "How did you acquire Vorthan linguistic skills?" he asked. "I learned from your own broadcasts." Nari said simply, "Your monitoring station sends data streams to your ships. I listened and learned. Your language is quite beautiful when it is not being used to threaten people." Dr. Vex felt a chill of understanding. She had been intercepting their communications for months. She knew about their plans, their weaknesses, their intentions. "Why have you not died?" he asked bluntly. "Our calculations were precise. This environment should have killed you within days." Nari gestured to the forest around them. "Your calculations assumed I would fight against this world, but I chose to learn from it instead. The trees taught me patience. The animals taught me cooperation. The plants taught me how to heal." She pressed her palm against the nearest trunk, and it began to glow with soft bioluminescence. The light spread through the bark like liquid starlight, revealing the intricate network of connections that linked every plant in the forest. "This world is not hostile, Doctor. It is protective. It has been hurt many times by visitors who saw only resources to exploit, but it welcomed me because I saw friends to help Doctor." Vex made rapid notes on his recording device. "This changes everything," he muttered. "The ecosystem is not primitive. It is advanced beyond our understanding." Nari nodded. "Yes, and it remembers every species that has tried to conquer it. Your people are not the first to underestimate this world, but you could be the first to learn from it." She whistled softly, and Hanel approached, carrying something in its claws. It was a communication device, clearly of Vorthon manufacture, but modified with organic components that pulsed with living light. "I have been monitoring your communications for some time." Nari said, "I know about the prison camps. I know about the slave colonies. I know that humans across the galaxy are suffering." Her voice remained calm, but Dr. Vex detected an undertone of steel. "I also know that my people believe I am dead. They have lost hope. But hope is like a seed, Doctor. It can." 6 months had passed since Dr. Kim Nari first set foot on Karo 7. The monitoring station had long since stopped predicting her death. Their computers could not process what she had become. She stood now in the highest branches of the great tree, a massive plant that rose nearly a mile above the forest floor. Her hair flowed loose around her shoulders, woven with flowers that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Her skin had a golden tint from exposure to the planet's strange radiation. Her Eyes held depths that seemed to reflect the wisdom of the ancient forest. Around her perched, the Council of Species Hanul sat at her right side. As always, the silver-furred creature's wings folded in respectful attention. To her left crouched Gangcheol, a massive bear-like animal with crystalline claws, who had become her chief enforcer. Behind them, arranged in careful hierarchy, sat representatives from every intelligent species on the planet. There were the aerial scouts led by Minji, a bird creature, with metal feathers who could fly faster than sound. There were the ground hunters commanded by Dongyun, a six-legged wolf whose pack controlled the forest floor. There were even plant representatives, mobile trees that could uproot themselves and walk when needed. They had all come because the tree network had brought disturbing news. The Vorthan were coming in force. Through root connections that spanned continents, the trees had felt the vibrations of landing ships on the far side of the planet. A research expedition with 50 scientists and 20 armed guards had established a base camp and was moving toward Nara's territory. The expedition leader, Dr. Vex, had brought advanced sensors to study the electromagnetic anomalies in her area. He had brought capture devices designed to subdue and contain unknown life forms. He had brought weapons capable of killing anything that stood in his way, but he had not brought understanding, and that would be his downfall. Nari pressed her palm to the bark of the great tree and let her consciousness flow into the planetary network. Instantly, she could see through the sensory organs of creatures across the forest. She watched through eagle eyes as the Vorthan convoy moved through distant valleys. She felt through root networks as their heavy vehicles poisoned the soil. She sensed through animal minds as fear spread ahead of the approaching aliens. The expedition was 3 days away, moving slowly because they stopped frequently to collect specimens and take measurements. They had no idea they were being watched by every plant and animal in their path. Through Hanil, Nari addressed the council. "We have prepared for this day for many months. The forest is ready. Are you ready?" The response came as a chorus of sounds, clicks from Minji's metal beak, growls from Dongyun's throat, harmonic vibrations from the mobile trees. Even the smaller creatures added their voices, mice that squeaked in unison, insects that buzzed in harmony. They were ready. Nari had spent months teaching them not just cooperation, but strategy. She had shown them how to use their natural abilities as weapons, how speed could become surprise, how camouflage could become ambush, how their knowledge of the terrain could become an overwhelming advantage. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would not meet the Vorthan in open battle. Instead, they would use the forest itself as a weapon. The aliens would find their equipment failing, their vehicles disabled, their communications cut. Their advanced technology would become useless in an environment that fought back. But first they needed to know exactly what they were facing. Nari sent out the scouts. Minji's aerial squad took to the skies, their metal feathers, reflecting sunlight in patterns that looked like natural phenomena to Vorthan sensors. They flew high above the expedition, taking detailed observations of weapons and equipment. Dongyun's ground hunters moved through the undergrowth invisible to alien eyes. They followed the convoy's scent trail and reported on numbers and movements. Even the plants got involved. Trees along the expedition route adjusted their growth to create hidden obstacles. Vines prepared to entangle vehicles at strategic moments. Flowers that produced hallucinogenic pollen concentrated their chemicals for maximum effect. The reports that came back through the tree network painted a clear picture. The Vorthan were confident and careless. They expected no resistance. From what they considered a primitive ecosystem, they moved in formation that worked well against conventional enemies, but left them vulnerable to attack from above, below, and all sides simultaneously. Dr. Vex had made the same mistake that countless invaders before him had made. He saw individual trees and animals where he should have seen a unified organism. He planned to study isolated specimens when he should have been preparing to face a planetary intelligence. On the second day of their Advance the expedition encountered their first obstacle. A bridge they had planned to cross was gone. The scan from orbit clearly showed a stone bridge spanning a deep ravine, but when they arrived they found only broken rubble in the water below. We'll have to go around, Dr. Vex told his team. The detour will add 6 hours to our schedule, but we cannot risk the vehicles in the ravine. What he did not know was that the bridge had been deliberately destroyed. Mobile trees had worked through the night to weaken the supports until the structure collapsed. The rubble would reform into a new bridge after the expedition passed, but for now the route was blocked. The detour led through a grove of silver trees that seemed ordinary to Vorthon sensors. But these trees had been preparing for months. Their flowers produced a concentrated form of pollen that caused confusion and disorientation in most alien species. Within an hour of entering the grove, half the expedition team was experiencing hallucinations. They saw phantom creatures in the shadows, heard voices calling from empty air, felt the ground moving beneath their feet like ocean waves. Dr. Vex ordered a halt and had his medics distribute anti-hallucinogenic drugs, but the chemicals took time to work, and the delay cost them another day. By the third day, the expedition was behind schedule and running low on medical supplies. They had encountered poisonous insects, equipment failures, and terrain that seemed to shift when they were not looking. "Directly at it! The forest is fighting us," one of the guards reported to Dr. Vex. "Everything here is hostile." "Sir." "Nonsense," Dr. Vex replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "We are dealing with unusual biochemistry. Nothing more. Keep moving. We are almost at the target coordinates." But as they crested the final hill before Naris territory, the expedition stopped in amazement. Below them, the forest had changed. The trees were arranged in perfect geometric patterns like a vast garden, bridges of living. Wood connected the canopy levels in an intricate network. Structures that could only be called buildings grew from the trunks and branches, and in the center of it, all rising higher than any other tree, was a spire of white wood that seemed to glow with its own light. "This is impossible," Dr. Vex whispered. "No primitive ecosystem could create such organization." His sensors detected electromagnetic activity that suggested a communication network spanning the entire visible forest. The energy patterns were complex and purposeful, like watching a vast mind at work. As they watched, creatures began to appear on the bridges and platforms. Birds with metal feathers landed in formation along the edges of clearings. 6-legged wolves emerged from the undergrowth in perfect ranks. Even the trees seemed to move, positioning themselves like soldiers preparing for battle. The expedition members raised their weapons, but Dr. Vex held up a hand. "Wait," he said. "We are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. If they wanted to attack us, they would have done it already. They are making a display of force above them in the canopy." A figure appeared, moving with graceful confidence along a bridge of woven vines. She was clearly human, but transformed. Her clothes were woven from plant fibers that shimmered like silk. Her hair moved as if touched by wind that no one else could feel. Her eyes seemed to hold the light of distant stars. Dr. Kim Nari. The subject who should have died in her first week had become something unprecedented in Vorthon records. She had become the queen of an entire world. And as Dr. Vex watched, she raised one hand in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. The forest fell silent, waiting for his response.